Hello and welcome to this video edition of Kitchen Excellence Week 2022. I'm delighted to be joined today by Chris Craggs, who is the CEO of MCFT. Chris is here to chat about some of the typical maintenance challenges that are faced by commercial kitchens today and the importance of the right service regime in the current climate. Chris, just to kick off, in your experience, what areas or aspects of a commercial kitchen are most prone to breakdown? In other words, what should operators always keep an eye on?
Well, there's two slightly different questions there, but I'll answer the second one first because the other one falls into some stuff we can explore. In terms of what operators should keep an eye on, first of all, safety and safety going into compliance, and so that could be annual gas certificates. Clearly, the last thing you want is accidents and mishaps. The second is perhaps more the sort of thing people think about, which is mission critical. Some of this stuff runs your operation, it'll cost you sales if it's not working, or unhappy customers when it fails. The third is what's actually susceptible to maintenance. There's some stuff, electrical equipment, you're not going to be able to predict failure. If the operator is looking after it properly, maintenance isn't going to do a great deal. There's other stuff, fridges, dishwashers and so forth, which again we'll touch on a little bit later, that absolutely benefit. And of course, these days, really important energy utilities. If you're not looking after stuff properly, you will end up paying through the nose, as we all are doing, for simply your electricity or your gas. So look after it and make sure that it's clean and your gas burners are operating efficiently, and it'll save you money.
Sure. Okay. I guess in the current climate, operators are looking at ways they might try to save money, and some may be thinking about carrying out maintenance on a less frequent basis. I'm guessing you would argue against that, but how often should operators carry out maintenance of their core equipment?
Well, I wouldn't. I think it's one of the shibboleths, that you carry out maintenance twice a year religiously. And if you stop and think about it, it can't make sense. And unfortunately, some of the wise heads in the industry continue this, and I won't name names, but the reformal programs that say there should be a main and an interim. But stop and think about it. If you're a school serving lunches only and you've got dinner ladies looking after it as they do, as if it was at home, what sort of damage and problems are you likely to get from less than 1,000 hours of use a year? Compare that to a hotel, breakfast, lunch and dinner. Stressed staff, let me put it gently, that's working 6,000 hours a year. Why would you have the same maintenance regime for one as the other? Setting that aside, again, coming back to this question of equipment, some stuff benefits, others don't. Thirdly, if your issues are really to do with operator error, no amount of PPM is going to sort that out, because the guy's going to come in tomorrow and is going to kick hell out of it again. You need to resolve those sort of issues before PPM will render a return. So no, absolutely not. Stop, look, talk to your service provider. And this is the theme really of that I'd like to emphasize is understand, what we mean by maintenance, what it's doing, what you're trying to achieve, what you need from it, what your goals and objectives are, and then set the appropriate regime in place, having against those criteria selected the correct operator. So it really is this naive expectation it should be twice a year is just wrong.
Sure. So it's very much a case-by-case basis, depending on your application and your use. Sure.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the term PPM there, planned preventative maintenance, and that's it's a very important service that you provide as a business. What does that actually involve, and to what extent does it reduce the chances of equipment suddenly breaking down?
Well, again, going to the second point last, it doesn't. This is not the entire reason you do it. There's a myriad of reasons: extending the life of the equipment, compliance issues, utilization of utilities. Just the facile comparison of spend $1,000 on PPM, save £1,000 on remedials. No, that is not the way it happens. But if you look at it entirely, you're going to save in its entirety. You're going to save lots of money, much more than £1,000. But simplistically, it's would you think to run your car for 50,000 miles and not imagine A, wear and tear, and B, stopping by the roadside and needing recovery? Of course you wouldn't. Well, this equipment in many ways suffers, depending on where it is and what it's doing, a lot more extreme use than your car does for most of us anyway, who are not rally drivers. The next question, well, okay, and we've talked about periodicity of this. What's the regime that this should follow? And historically, there's been no clarity around this. And there's a naive assumption on behalf of customers. And again, customers need to educate themselves. Otherwise, they'll be taken advantage of, particularly when they're putting pressure on costs, which I know everybody thinks about. There hasn't been a standardized regime around what people do for PPM until 6 years ago, at the behest of a national retailer. The Food Equipment Association, or CEDA as it was then, CISO as it was then, came up with the modules for SFG 20. So the important thing about this is 180 plus manufacturers that regroup into FEA, the Food Equipment Association, Food Service Equipment Association, agreeing together on a harmonized regime about what you do to a brat pan, a fridge, a dishwasher, a microwave. Ending up in 600 plus pages of a standard of the tasks that need to be carried out when you're carrying out preventative maintenance. Here for the first time is the industry agreeing what a single standard should be. But by implementing that, they've almost created the next problem, which is how on earth do you try and implement 600 pages of different tasks? Here's a brat pan, here's a dishwasher, and get that applied. And so this is the next question that customers need to be challenging their service providers with. So A, what standard, and hopefully people are saying SFG 20, and B, how is that going to be delivered? How is the technician in the field going to be able to do it? And with all due respect, if it's not being done on a phone or on a tablet, it cannot be done. You can't have 600 pieces of paper for every individual on site. So for the first time now, there are standards about what this should look like, and there are systems in order to be able to deal with it. That is the standard. People allude to the fact, well, it's gold plated. Well, evidence to me what the background of an alternative is. There is none. Now, it could be in this particular situation, and I'd absolutely concur with this, in a discussion with the customer, you decide you're not going to carry out some of those tasks because it's just out of warranty, it's brand new, it's not been used for the last 2 years, whatever those reasons are, fine. But let's go into it very clear about what the standard was and take out those tasks that didn't need to be done. And then we're clear. What you don't want is a sort of fudging, no need to look over here, nothing to see, leave it all to our people, they know what they're doing, they're professionals. Well, really, under different pressured situations, busy today, quiet tomorrow, Tom, Dick and Harry all carrying out the same work assiduously. I'm sorry, it's not how it works. We know it's not how it works. You need systems and processes for that to happen. So that's what PPM should be. But again, customers, go and find out and understand what it is and ask questions, be skeptical.
Sure. Your engineers are visiting a lot of kitchens every day, and best practice is clearly very important. What in your mind constitutes a well-maintained commercial kitchen?
I'd start off by saying shockingly rare, sadly, and I do come back to this point. It's customers and big customers who should know better. So national chains who appear not to have somebody responsible with an organization for setting out the standard and then verifying that it's being applied. And it's disappointing is all I can say. As I've already alluded to, this for me, this is appropriate. So are we seeing the right intervals? Are we seeing the right regime for different bits of kit? Is there evidence that this is being done conscientiously? Sadly, and this is a wider point, the universal refrain has been cost. People need to stop and think about what happens when people say you need to shave your costs, and what's going to the consequence of that. And people know what the market is like. They still want the work. They're going to find a way to get into the sort of budget figure that they think you had in your head. They're not particularly going to disclose how they achieve that, and you're not probably asking the questions or sufficiently on the ball in order to know the things that can't be done. How is this going to happen? Well, the overheads are not going to change. So that's a static block in the equation. They're not going to do it for nothing. So the profit broadly stays there. If there are parts involved, there's broadly nothing that can happen there. So what's going to be squeezed when you try and get 15 or 20% out of your cost of maintenance? It's going to directly affect the labor element of that service that was being delivered. So instead of 15 or 20% on that labor element, it's going to be 50% and more. So now we're into, I'm sorry guys, you've got 15 minutes across all the items, in the kitchen, some of which can be done in 15 minutes, but the vast majority of which cannot. It'll take 3 hours to do the proper service on the cold room with a, significant refrigerant charge. You then get very poor service. But that I'd really go back to customers and say, when you say shave 15% or 20% or somebody comes offering it because we can do the same job for cheaper, just be challenging about how you're going to achieve that. Really be challenging. I know this goes on to your next question, so it's repeating on customers being skeptical and really seeking to understand how things are going to be achieved.
Sure, yeah, because as you rightly say, cost inflation is a real issue right now, and some operators would be thinking about how they can reduce that element of their business. But conversely, I guess equipment maintenance actually becomes more important in this climate than not.
I'd argue that it does, because this directly affects your profitability. But going on to the next stage of it, and of course this depends on scale and size of estate and situation and so forth. But we have been working with a cloud kitchen estate who, having carried out the surveys and really got into it, has got 170 different brands of equipment in the kitchen, in their kitchens. And this is probably not untypical. Estates have been built up by acquisition from random places, and it seemed like a good idea at the time, and we just added it in. And then people have been susceptible to a deal and have bought something cheap, and there's no support and backup for it. How is any service provider going to look after 170 different brands? We all know there's a core, and you'll see them week after week in FEJ, of I was going to say premium. I think that's doing them a disservice, because what I mean by that is these are companies that are set up in order for this equipment to be absolutely operating to customers' requirements and supported. So whether it's parts availability or technical manuals or training for service technicians, this is a completely different level from this prototype that was a steal, and therefore you thought what could go wrong and you bought it, and now guess what, 6 months in you're in the lurch. So for goodness sake, stop and think about that, depending on where you're going. And as you're making these acquisitions, put aside a budget for binning that stuff, that nobody's ever heard of before, because it's just going to be a nightmare. And you're going to be turning a service provider and say, why isn't it working? Well, there's no availability of parts. Nobody's got any technical insights into it. There's no support for it. Please, please, please buy a recognized name. So again, it comes back to people just stopping to think about, the lifetime cost of this stuff can be 80% in terms of life rather than purchase. So whether it's utilities or the cost of maintenance, stop and think when you're buying equipment, not just that initial purchase price, but what it's going to cost over the duration of that life.
Yeah, it's a great note to end on, Chris. Is there anything else you wanted to say, or a piece of advice you'd like to give to operators when it comes to best practice of kitchen maintenance and service moving forward?
I think it is just go and challenge the service provider. Go and ask the questions, understand what the company that's coming forward and proposing it, where is it coming from? What experience has it got? How open is it prepared to be about walking the course with you and saying, here, you're likely to have problems. This stuff, we can absolutely stand by. Yes, we can absolutely deliver an 85, 90% first time fix on this, because this is regular standard equipment. And again, come back to the operators, make sure their operators are using things properly, because there's nothing you can do, nothing we can do if the operator's misusing, neglecting. That's something that has to be addressed at source.